welcome to another episode of Discover with Sbenati. I'm your host, Dr. Halim Sbenati, and today is an amazingly exciting podcast. For those that are listening, welcome to the podcast. For those that are watching, welcome to the YouTube podcast. Today we have a very special guest. As always, we only have very special guests, and today's absolutely no exception. His name is Rob Freeman. He went from, is it safe to say, from rags to riches?
Sure.
He went from rags to riches. He struggled quite a bit, and he has a very interesting story as to how he went through it. I can briefly say it to you guys. So he went from being a broker to then, then landing a air balloon pilot license, and then discovering that the seasons weren't not in his favor. Then he went and tried to find some kind of jobs around the city and here in London, while trying to wait for the seasons to actually kick off so he can do the air balloon piloting. And then he realized that this is not something that he could do for a year long because it's a seasonal thing. So then he went on to Alberta, then he went to BC, then he came back all the way back to London, started a telecom company that had 150,000 customers, 300 employees, and then he sold it to Primus. At that time, he got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a cancer, it's a form of a cancer, and he fought it for 3 years. And in the meantime, as life would teach us, nothing's ever smooth sailing. There's always some kind of crisis control that you would have. And so that as he was building his home, he got diagnosed and he was fighting cancer. And then everything started to kick off from then, or started to keep going. Because his life, I don't think, ever stopped kicking. So without any further ado, today we are going to discuss three main things. Okay, we're going to discuss how he went, or the battles that he went through from when he had absolutely nothing, and then how he actually did this whole company from his basement, and then he built it to this amazing huge company that he sold to Primus. We'll discover a little bit of tricks and maybe a little bit of tips that he can give some entrepreneurs, those that are looking to do certain things, because I'm sure a lot of you are. And then we'll discuss his research and his documentary on UFOs. This man has sighted and has seen multiple times UFOs, and this is no joke. This is not made up. This is not pie in the sky rhetoric. This is not like, I'm just doing this just to get a little bit of clicks from you, but for real, he's got proof. He goes around the world to cite these. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. And the last thing he's going to talk about is the Q Biologics. Q Biologics is a company he co-founded, and this company is going to revolutionize medicine in one degree in terms of fighting cancer and in terms of fighting Crohn's and perhaps even other diseases as well. I'm not going to talk anymore. Without any further ado, here is Rob Freeman. Rob Freeman, please introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll hit it up.
Yeah, my name's Rob Freeman. I live just outside London. I'm 65 years old, and really, I figure I've really just started.
That's amazing.
I've been through so many interesting and fascinating things, but there's always so much more to do. And I swear I'll be kicking right to the day that they put me under.
That's amazing.
That's
amazing. All right, let's get right into it.
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
So I described your story very, very briefly. And it's always easy to describe a story in hindsight. But when you're living it, it's always tough.
It is, because it happens more in slow motion.
That's right.
When you describe it after the fact, you can summarize and do the whole story.
That's right. And I'm sure now you have a big smile on your face. I'm sure at the time you didn't have a huge smile on your face.
Well, it's like many other people. If I knew today, or if I knew then what I knew today, I probably wouldn't have started it. Because for whatever reason, all the challenges you're going to face are hidden from you. Mm-hmm. And if you knew what all the challenges truly were, most people would never do anything. They would just remain in a very safe cocoon, safe environment without ever doing anything in their life. But for whatever reason, we're given these ideas, we're given these dreams, these visions, and we go for them. And then while we're involved with them, the challenges hit.
Right.
And that's the whole thing, is trying to overcome these challenges. But if you truly believe in yourself and what you're doing, you will.
So now you're talking about belief, okay, and you're talking about challenges. So now when you have challenges, how do you keep that belief in yourself? to
Well,
get you to keep going through the challenges?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the passion you have for something. You know, if you truly want to do something, you'll do it in the face of everybody, even if it's your own spouse or your family or your close friends telling you not to. I swear that the universe puts all those people in front of you to make you fight harder. Because that's what happened in my case. Many times when somebody says no, I hear go. So, and you know, so many times when, you know, people give up just before they're ready to make the breaks and the breakthroughs. I remember when I had started London Telecom, and it was a flat rate telephone service before that was really available here many years ago. It was really one of the first competitors to the major phone companies here in Canada. And the CRTC had not published the fact that competition was really happening. They were going through all the hearings and so on, but it actually started very quietly and nobody really knew. And I was one of the first companies, and I was advertising my service and nobody would take me up on it. They all thought it was a scam. And I remember, you know, I had set up in Burlington, Ontario, for putting calls through from Toronto to Hamilton to Toronto, those areas, very lucrative areas for long distance. And I was going door to door, I was making phone calls, and absolutely nobody would take my service. People would hang up on me, they would swear at me, they would close their door on me. Everybody says, well, you can't compete with Bell. They have a monopoly. Whatever you have must be a scam. And it was really disheartening. And I remember my wife at the time, I had set up the system, and I think the monthly cost for the very basic system through Bell Canada's Centrex system was like $800. And she opened up the phone bill and she said, what's this? And I said, well, that's the phone bill for the service that I've set up. Well, how many customers do you have? I said, none. She said, well, you have to cancel that. You know, we had a young boy at home just in diapers, and, you know, he says, you're taking food out of his mouth. And I felt like about that high, and I was starting to think, you know, she's right. I shouldn't be taking this risk and spending this money, and I can't get any customers. And she said, you're going to have to close it down. And this was the beginning of December of something like we'll say 1989, somewhere in that time frame. And I was really disheartened, and now I'm under pressure. And I said, can you give me to the end of December? Can you give me 1 month? And if I don't have any customers, I'll cut it. And I was so upset at the thought that this thing I was so passionate about, and I'm now agreeing to my wife that if we don't get customers in a month, I got to shut it down. So I didn't know what else I was going to do. So literally that day when I was driving to Burlington to, you know, pick up that 110-pound phone and call more people, and knowing that I'm going to get rejection upon rejection upon rejection. So I wasn't looking forward to it. But when I was driving there, I heard this, I was listening to this radio station. It was coming in on the AM dial from Fort Wayne, Indiana, WOWO. It's one of these long-range stations. And they were just saying how they had a show for entrepreneurs, and it had gone on for about 30 minutes, and it was a famous entrepreneur that was giving tips to people. And I just tuned in. And he said, just as I tuned in, he said, for those who have just tuned in, the moderator says, what can you summarize what we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes? And this famous entrepreneur says, well, he says, believe in yourself, believe in your own ideas, and stick-to-itiveness. And he says,
and what was the last thing?
Stick-to-itiveness.
Okay, stick-to-itiveness.
Right? Stick-to-itiveness.
Okay.
And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, everybody believes in themselves and their own ideas, but he says many people give up just before something's ready to break open. Like a week, a day, a month. He said, if you can just make, 10 more calls, if you can just stick at it for another week. And so I pulled over and I wrote it down. I wrote those 3 ideas down. And then I, drove to Burlington. I had my tiny little office in a basement. I had given the guy free service, long distance service, and he gave me a desk in a cold, damp basement where I almost caught my death of a cold. Oh. And I'm making calls again, through the phone book and people, and nobody would take the service. And I'm advertising in the paper every day, and no calls. So I'm wasting money. I'm driving, spending money on gas. I have this phone system that's rented from Bell, like through their own network, and I'm paying for ads and nothing. And finally, after about 3 or 4 days of doing this, I got a phone call from the Hamilton Spectator. And it was a local newspaper there, and it was a fellow by the name of Wade Hemsworth. And he says, "Hi, Rob." He says, "I've been seeing your ads in the paper. Is that a scam?" He comes right out and says, "Is that a scam?" And I says, "No, would you like to hear about it?" And I told him the whole story about how they're allowing competition and how I'm doing this, and it's a flat rate of $29 a month for unlimited calls between the Hamilton, Burlington area and Toronto. He says, "Wow, that sounds like a cool idea." And he says, "Do you mind if I write a story about it?" And I thought, yes, thank God. And he says, "Well, how many customers do you have?" And I thought, if I say 0, I'm screwed. And I actually told him 300, but in truth, I did have 300. I had a sharing system set up around the London area, out to the areas like Strathroy, St. Thomas, and Exeter. They're all local now. But I jumped the calls through a midpoint where it was common. It was local calling to both ends. So I did have 300 customers there in a sharing group. So, and he says, "Well, great." And he asked me many questions. I told him the whole story. And I said, and when would you be printing the story? And he says, "Well, it would be January 2nd. And my heart just sank, and I thought, oh my God, I promised my wife.
Right, end of December.
We cut it at the end of December if I don't have any customers.
So hold on, so why did you say that you didn't have customers? Are you saying now you have?
Well, I had no customers in that area. Yeah, I had
so
no.
You had income coming in.
Well, it was a sharing group. So because at that time you couldn't resell, but you could operate a sharing group that was nonprofit. Like you could aggregate lines, and then you could have everybody on a liability agreement for the cost of the system, and you could have an administrator taking a basic cost for your expenses. So,
and you were the administrator?
Yeah, I was. So it wasn't a profit-making thing.
It
was just a shared thing to cut costs, right?
I got you.
But, they're customers as far as I was concerned. So anyway, my heart sunk when he said January 2nd. And so that night I get home and I tell my wife, and I said, "Well, they're going to do a story on us." And she said, "When is it going to be?" I said, "January 2nd. And she thought I was lying through my teeth. And I said, "Can you give me just a few days past January 2nd, right? And if there's nothing, then we cut the system." Well, when the article came out January 2nd, and of course that's over the New Year's weekend, holiday weekend or whatever, and everybody reads the paper. And that's why the article was appearing then, because people have nothing to do. And if there's a paper sitting at somebody's house, they pick it up and read it, right? So he said that's where we do all the community stories. And so when that newspaper article hit, the phone started ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it never stopped after that. Never stopped. And, I went on and grew the company. And as you said, we had 150,000 customers. We were bringing in $10 million a month.
Wow.
And ultimately, I sold the company for $76 million. Wow. And with only one $10,000 loan at the beginning. Wow. There was no borrowed money after that.
Wow. That's
amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I sold it to Primus Canada, and but then 3 weeks later I got diagnosed with cancer. That leads into the other story.
Okay, so just to back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So as you were doing this, you believed in yourself a lot.
Yes.
Was there something that actually put that in you as you were growing up?
Yes, it was. When I was very young, my mom and dad didn't have that much money, so we didn't really have too many toys. And there was one toy that I really liked, and it was a set of Remco phones. And they were those yellow phones that had a little dial in them and a couple big batteries and 50-foot of cable. And I had one in my bedroom, and my brother had one. So we'd have fun just, calling up the other guy and talking and hanging up, and, it was a toy, right? And I had told my friend at school, and I was only about, maybe 8 years old, 9 years old, I don't remember now. And I had told a friend at school about these phones, and this was quite a high-tech thing for then. Now we have the internet and cell phones that are like computers, but not then. This was, you know, in the 60s, in the late 50s, early 60s. And I told him about this phone he wanted to see. So he came over to my place after school, and we went to use the phones, and they didn't work. And I was so annoyed, so upset that he'd come all the way, because it was a long way from where he lived, just to see these phones and how they worked. It'd be like showing a cell phone today.
Right.
And so I took them out to my mom in the kitchen who was making dinner, and I says, Mom, can you fix the phone? My friend's here all the way from school to see this, and it's not working. And she says, oh, Rob, you'll have to wait till your dad comes home. I don't know how to fix that. And he wouldn't be home till 5:30, and my friend had to leave by 5. So I says, no, you got to fix it, Mom. So she reached into the kitchen drawer and grabbed a screwdriver and handed it to me and says, try to fix it yourself. And I thought, well, I got no choice. So, and I hadn't a clue with anything like this before this. So I opened up the back, and sure enough, the wire had come loose from the battery inside. And I just screwed it down, put the batteries back in, put it back together, and the phones worked. Well, for me, that was a huge charge of I had accomplished something.
Right.
As a kid. I fixed something. So my dad saw the interest that I had in this, and for Christmas he bought me. They were decommissioning a phone system in Inwood, Ontario, with all the old switchboards and the crank phones at that time.
Yes.
And they were selling the stuff off cheap. So he got me an old switchboard and a bunch of these old crank phones for a Christmas present. And I was totally fascinated by this stuff. And I set up a little mini phone system on our street. I got together with my friends, and we buried lines in the yard along the fence lines and connected up my friends.
Wow.
So when they wanted to call each other, they would call up, and my switchboard would ring, and I'd run down to my bedroom and connect a call through to whoever friend they wanted to talk to. And then when it hung up, there'd be buzzing, and then I'd just disconnect the line. So I was very interested in all this stuff. And then later, you know, when I was in electrical engineering, I got a job in co-op installing mobile phones in cars. So I always had this interest. And I got into real estate, and I did well in real estate, but for whatever reason, I got all these listings in Strathroy. And because the one lady whose home I listed, I was working very hard for her. I was advertising every week, and she thought that was so cool, unlike her other agent who didn't do nothing. So she told all her friends about me, and they all listed. So I had 16 listings in Strathroy that in a time in a market when the market was slow. And I was spending money. And I had to, my view was always you called your vendor once a week and let them know what's happening. But it was long distance. See, this is how it really got started. It was long distance. So I was talking to 16 of my listings every week, long distance to Strathroy. And that was at a time when long distance calls were 38 cents a minute.
Wow.
They were ripping everybody off.
Yeah, right.
And so my phone bill was probably in the neighborhood of $200 or $300 a month just to service those listings. And they weren't selling either. So I wasn't getting money. And I said to myself, there's got to be a better way that I can save money here. And I thought to myself, I remembered that the town halfway between Strathroy and London, Mount Bridges, was local to both. And I thought if you could somehow connect lines together, if you could somehow call into Mount Bridges and then connect to an outgoing line from there, then you could make free calls to Strathroy. And that's what I wanted to do. I was just trying to save money for myself. And I researched it out, and I called Bell, and they said, well, you could set up a sharing group, and you know, you have to sign this agreement, and everybody could sign this agreement, and you'd have to use some kind of equipment that can bridge the calls. And I researched it out, and there was. They were called call diverters. It was just a Philips device that you plugged into the phone line in Mount Bridges, and you could call that from London, and it connects the outgoing line in Mount Bridges, and you get dial tone, and then you just dial through. So I set one of those up, and I started going door to door and asking if people would like to try this free service.
Wow.
Right? And so they tried it, and they got to make calls for free. I had them keep track of how many times there was a busy signal.
Who, Bell?
No, the people using the system.
Oh, okay. So they were keeping the track.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they were getting a free service,
Yeah,
so they were willing to do the research for me.
Yeah.
And I discovered that it was literally only 1 out of 10 calls. So you could put 10 people on a set of lines without hardly bumping into each other. It was like 5% of the time. So then I then set it up as a formal sharing group. And I think it was like $15 a month to pay for all this. And then they told all their friends, and I set it up in these other towns also, out to St. Thomas and to Exeter, and ultimately I had 300 people that were paying $15 a month. You know,
and you did this all by yourself?
I did it by myself, yeah.
Wow.
And that's when they were just going through the process of allowing deregulation and competition to the phone company. And I thought, well, I've got this set up. Maybe I can be a competitor. And so there's more to the story. I didn't know where to start up.
That's exactly right.
I didn't know where to start up.
So then, okay. So that you took us through a journey here from when your mom gave you the screwdriver.
Yes.
And you said a thing that really intrigued me. You said that you felt that you had no choice because your friend was supposed to leave at 5. And so you were put in that position where he's like, well, I've got no other thing to do at this point except try this.
Yeah, exactly.
So don't you think that having the no choice, that is the secret sauce in encountering whatever challenge that you encounter for you to keep going when you don't have any choice?
I think it is. It's kind of like, you know, I sometimes think if you had 2 high-rises in New York and you had a beam that was maybe 4 inches wide stretched between the 2 buildings, and if you were on one side and somebody had your kid to a knife point on the other building, just 20 feet across, and he said to you, if you cross this 4-inch beam and you're 100 stories up, you will save your child's life. Would you do it?
Of course.
But if he offered just, you know, $1 million, your child isn't there, but it's $1 million, would you do it then?
If there wasn't that urgency, then you probably wouldn't.
Yeah, you would be so scared. But if it was your child, you'd be so focused.
You would see nothing else.
Yeah. Now, I don't exactly compare this to this situation, but it was like he was so excited and wanted to see it working. I didn't want to disappoint him.
Right.
And I wanted to show him.
Right. So
and I didn't want to wait till my father got home.
Right. So when you started doing all this network, the sharing,
yes.
Is it called network sharing?
It was a sharing group.
A
legal sharing group.
Sharing group.
Yeah.
So you were doing the sharing group.
Yeah.
And so when they did the deregulation of competition, so now you can actually compete against Bell. Were you already in a position where you felt like you had no choice but to pursue your passion?
Well, let's see. Because I was so passionate about that, I saw it as an opportunity to use the expertise that I'd now learned. And I really didn't want to stay in real estate, you see.
Exactly.
It's something my dad did, and I did it to earn money, and I was very good at it. But I remember when I would be taking people to show homes, my brain would always be brainstorming on different ideas, like entrepreneurial things, right?
Right.
So, and I saw this as a way to get out of real estate.
Right.
And I saw it as a way that I could apply my own creativity.
Right.
Not what somebody else wanted me to do. It would be me. All this coming from within inside me.
And that would give you the what's it called, the pride.
That's what I felt, yeah.
Now,
and so it was a perfect opportunity.
Yes, but that happened only after you came back to London, right? Because initially you were a broker in London.
Real estate broker.
And then you did your air balloon license, your air balloon pilot license.
Yes, I did.
And then you found out that this was not something you can do year long.
Yes.
You struggled a lot during that time.
Yes.
And then after that, you went to Alberta. You enrolled to university.
Yeah, I went back to university.
That's right.
For engineering.
That's right. And then you discovered that that's not something that you want to do.
I found out that going back to school when you're older is very difficult.
Yeah.
Do it when you're younger. Whoever's watching, do it when you're younger, not after.
and then you went to BC.
Yes.
Victoria, BC.
Yes.
Okay, to become an electrician?
Well, because that was a co-op job.
Right.
That was a co-op job, and I hated doing that.
Yes, but then you got 98% in it.
Yes.
And then they offered you a job to teach.
They were having me teach the students.
And then you got sick of it, and then you went back to London.
I did.
And then you said to yourself, what am I going to do?
Well, there's even more to the story.
Oh, there is?
There's a lot of happenstance, or, is it? Are we getting a little bit of help from the universe? No idea. All I know is that my brother was in charge of keeping our real estate licenses going while I was out west. And I said, and don't forget to renew our real estate licenses. He was working for me. When you get the renewal. And he said, yeah, absolutely, I'll do it the same day. Well, in the meantime, they had seen a house that they liked, and they bought it, right? And they sold their house.
But you didn't have a license.
And yeah, but he was too cheap to do the forwarding of the mail.
Oh.
They had readdressed everything except the real estate registrar's office.
Right.
So when the renewal came, it went to the old people's, like his old house, and they just threw it in the garbage. So when I came back and started selling real estate again, I didn't realize I didn't have a license. And I got in a lot of trouble for that. They called both of us to the registrar's office in Toronto and speak our story. And then they said they would decide what punishment we were going to have. And we never heard from them. They kept our licenses for 3 months. And they sent them back 3 months later and they said, we consider this punishment enough that you haven't been able to sell real estate for 3 months. So in the meantime, I had to get a job.
That's what it is.
Yes, I had to get a job, and I thought, what can I do, right? So I looked in the paper, and there was a listing for multipath communications to sell phone systems. And I thought, I could do that. That would be easy. That's right up my alley. I'm interested in phones and stuff. And I took a job with them, and I was working, and that's when they started really talking about competition. And that's when I set up my sharing group, because I had already sold real estate and then found out I didn't have my license, and I had all those 16 listings and so on. You know, I have to get the timeline exact. It's so many years ago. But it all happened around the same time. And bring me back to where I am here.
And then so after you did the whole sharing, so that's the point that you hit. You hit the point that you, because you're like, what am I going to do?
Yes,
I have no choice now.
Yes.
But to do something.
Yes.
What is that thing?
Right.
And then you tapped into your passion.
Yes, it did. Well, see, that's when I got the job at Multipath Communications.
Right.
And I never wound up selling a thing. But I was reading up on the whole technical side of the phone systems. Yeah.
And it started jogging your entrepreneurial engines.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then you, because you were already at that point, right? Because you went to different regions of Canada, came back. At that point, I can only imagine, at that point, you're thinking to yourself, seriously, like, what am I going to do? I don't want to go back to the same route. I don't want to keep struggling.
Right. I didn't want to continue selling real estate. And, I had set up my sharing group.
Right.
That was great.
Right.
And when they then started opening it up to the public, like that you could set up a long distance company, a legitimate long distance company.
Yeah.
That's when I thought, here's my chance.
Right.
But now I didn't know where in Canada I should set up. Did you read that part of the story?
I didn't get to that.
Okay.
I didn't get to that.
So this is interesting because I said to myself, where do I set up in Canada? I had no idea where. We didn't have the internet then, so I couldn't really research stuff except for the library. And I had been talking with CRTC and I'd been receiving information from them on this whole deregulation of the phone industry. And so I've been receiving publications. And once again, I put the question out in my own mind, where do I set up? I've got my sharing groups, but now I can go big with this. And I can tear up the sharing group agreements and I can do like resale, right? Where it's a for-profit enterprise. So that question was out there. And then literally a week or two later, my doorbell rang and it was the UPS guy. And he brought this tube like that long, and on the outside of it, it said, for 4th level Bell Canada managers only. I thought, what? Are they using this tube or something for me to send stuff, but why does it say that? That looks top secret. 4th level Bell Canada managers only. He left, and I opened it up, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was a complete executive summary of Bell Canada's territory, all laid out by dollar revenue, all their areas for long distance, broken down by exchange for their entire, it was top secret. It was,
wow.
It was like industrial espionage, but CRTC gave it to me by mistake, okay? It fell off a truck. And I looked at this, I felt my face getting all red, and I quickly closed the drapes. And I thought, do I take pictures of this? What should I do? I'm not supposed to have this. This is like industrial espionage. And I looked through it all, and I read it, and I thought, it showed how there was millions of dollars per month in revenue flow for long distance between the Hamilton, Burlington area and Toronto. You see, that was their #1 lucrative spot. of traffic.
And that's why you decided to go to Burlington.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought, there's my answer.
Right.
There's where I set up.
Right.
And I quickly rolled everything up,
Right.
put it back in the tube. I called CRTC and I says, I think I've received a document in error. And she said, what is it? She says, oh my God, you shouldn't have that. And so she says, just stay on the line. She says, I'm going to call UPS right now and have them pick that up in 10 minutes.
Wow.
I'm going to turn the truck around, right? And he did. He came back, he made a big joke, and I said, here it is, right? But I'd already read it.
Right.
And I knew where to set up.
Right.
That was my answer.
Right. But
So I put the question out.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So you put that's another secret too.
Yeah.
Is that you asked the right question.
I did.
You weren't, oh, woe is me, can't believe this is happening to me. You're saying, how can I do this?
Where should I set up
Yes.
to get started with long
Exactly.
distance? And that was my answer.
Exactly. So if this is any lesson to anybody, it's to ask questions
Yes.
rather than pity yourself.
Don't ever pity yourself.
It's to ask
Never fall
questions.
into pity. Yeah. Ask questions.
Questions that are going to lead you to the place you're trying to get to.
Yeah. So then that's where I set up, and that's where we ultimately did a huge amount of business right there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's awesome. And then you worked at it for how many years?
I started it in '88 and sold it in '99.
99.
Yeah.
Okay, so 11 years.
11 years.
11
yeah.
years. And then Primus bought
They
it.
bought it. Yeah.
Okay, they
Yeah.
bought it.
They've incorporated it into their network. now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So they kept the name for about a year or two, and then it's
Right.
part of their system.
And then you were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yes.
How did that make you feel at that point? Because you felt, I'm pretty sure you felt like you were on top of the world.
Yes. Well, I did. I had just sold my company for cash.
Right.
And can I tell a quick little story around that
Absolutely.
too?
This is for you.
When just before the deal closed, Primus came back, and because the deal was for $76 million, they came back and they said, we'll give you 50% more if you take shares in the company. Just a small down payment, but you'll get 50% more for a sale price. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting, but no, it's not cash. And who knows where their shares are going to go? I said no. Now, my top guys owned part of the company. They had earned into it. I let them earn into my company. So they were all excited about this, thinking that this gives them a chance to earn more, right? I'm getting the big number, and they're getting, like, I think they had 15% between all of them, right? And then I said, absolutely not. We're not going to go for that deal. And, you know, faces dropped and so on. And they said, why? Easy for you. You're getting the big money, but what about us, you know? This is quite meaningful for us if we can get 50% more. And I said, it's just too risky. Cash is king. Well, so when the sale closed, the shares Primus went from $55 to $65 right away. And of course, I got phone calls from my guys the next day. Look. And I said, yeah, but we wouldn't be able to get that. Our hands would be tied. It's a public company. Our hands would be tied for several months. Well, the moral of the story is that Primus's shares dropped after that, and they kept going. And they dropped all the way to 25 cents from $65 all the way down to 25 cents, and they never went above $1 after that. So had I taken that deal, I'd be penniless today.
Oh my goodness.
But see, that's greed.
Yeah, right.
Don't be greedy.
Right.
We were happy with the deal that we got. It was cash. It was a lot of money.
Right.
Stop right there.
Right.
You know, don't go back to the tables and bet more, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Wow.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So.
That's interesting. So okay, no, that's great. Now I want to get back into so now you're on top of the world.
Yes.
So and then you got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I did.
Now at that moment, how did that make you feel?
Horrible. Because I spent many hours at the hospital that day because I had felt a lump. And they first thought it was an impacted bowel and that it was a lump in the lower left abdomen. And they thought, well, you know, if it's an impacted bowel, you're going to need a barium enema. It won't be comfortable, but do the process and you'll be out, and that'll be the end of it. So that's what I was hoping and thinking, that it was just an impacted bowel. And I did many tests. He did x-ray, they did CAT scan, they did blood tests, they asked many questions, they, you know, touched me physically. And then in the afternoon, I was in the room, and the doctor came in and knelt beside me and put his arm around me. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to tell me. I've never had a doctor do that. And I thought, he's going to tell me something I don't want to hear. I just knew it. And he says, you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I said, is that cancer? And he said, yes. And my heart just sunk. For about a half a second, my thought was, it's over. You're dead. That's it. And then in that half second, I immediately thought of my boys, Mark and Zan. And they were young, and I thought, the mother's having health issues, her mother's having health issues. We were already divorced at that point. And I thought, my God, within a few months, they could lose both their parents. There's just no way this is going to happen. I'm not going to let this happen. So it was them that motivated me. It was, my own children, the fact that there's no way I wanted them to lose to lose both their parents, right? So in that half second, all this went through my mind. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, no way I'm going to survive. And I have to be there for them. So I said to myself, I will spend every single penny that I just got, if necessary, to find a way to save my life. And I said to my dad, if I have to go to the slopes of Tibet and put on those pink outfits and be in, meditation all day, if that'll save my life, I'll do it. Not a problem. What's the point in having money if you're dead? Mm-hmm. Or, sick, dead. So I did. The doctor told me that the prognosis for the cancer was that, what was it now? 50%. 50% were gone in the first year of that diagnosis. That's the stats.
Okay.
And 2/3 were gone in 5 years.
By gone, you mean dead?
Dead.
Okay.
And I thought, my God, I've got to beat these odds. So I started thinking, if the odds are only 1/3 that I'm going to live, I've got to get that to half or even more. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking, what things can I do to add incrementally smaller chances of survival, small chances of survival on top.
Yeah.
So to bring it from 30% to over 50% and then ultimately higher. So I took this treatment down in Houston, Texas, a Brzezinski treatment. Mm-hmm. But it involved a catheter in the arteries, and you had to carry a pump. And I remember I was there with my dad and my stepmom, and the surgeon that put the catheter in, there was like a contract, an agreement I had to sign, like a waiver, I guess. Mm-hmm. And, in typical business agreements, there's fine print. Mm-hmm. In the medical agreement, it was large print, where at the bottom it said, everything else seemed to be in fine print, but it was very large. Patient understands and accepts that there is a 15% risk of death in this procedure.
Wow. And
I look at it and I said, what do I do? And I said, 15% is actually a fairly high number, as far as I thought. And my dad says, well, if you don't get this medicine, you may be gone anyway. Mm. And I said, okay, so I signed it. And I took this treatment, and it was a couple months later that I actually caught an infection through the catheter, the actual thing that it talked about in the bottom.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I had just come back to London here. I had a temperature of, 104.5 Fahrenheit. And went to the university hospital, but I made the mistake of taking an aspirin before I went. Mm. So my temperature came down, and they took blood and they sent me home. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right, false readings.
Right.
Yeah.
So that afternoon, they called me and they said, this is an emergency. Wherever you are, you drop everything. He said, if you have to go through a red light, you just come straight here and get yourself into emergency. You have a serious, life-threatening blood infection. that if we don't see you immediately, you won't survive. And so we did turn around. I was in Burlington or something visiting somebody, and my brother was with me, and we just came straight to the hospital, and they hospitalized me. And it was 3 days before they gave me the final medicine of what to do. They were culturing it. They didn't know which antibiotic to give. And I survived for 3 days with a Staph aureus blood infection, and I was down to 138 pounds. And
From what?
178.
Wow.
Yeah, it just was eating me. Yeah. And I had no energy at all. And I had a really, I guess you'd say, a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to get into that or not.
Well, I mean,
It's part of the story.
You mentioned it.
Yeah. Some people don't go along with this stuff, but it's what happened to me.
Yeah.
So I will tell it. So I was so weak that when people came to the hospital, and I would talk to them for 10 minutes, that I had to sleep for 5 hours afterwards. Just a normal conversation was so exhausting for me.
Right.
It'd be like, I compare it to like, when you leave your lights on in the car and you come back and they're just that yellowy orange color.
Right.
There's no battery, no power in your battery.
Right.
That's how I felt.
Right.
And it was exhausting just to have a normal conversation with somebody. That's how low my energy was, right? And the one morning I woke up on that third day and I felt this presence of black around me. Yeah. Now, whether this is hallucinatory or what it is, I don't know. For me at the time, it was real, okay? But it was this black, and every time I woke up, it was closer.
Like, you mean you could see, or you could see something
I could
black?
sense it.
Okay, okay.
It was like this black that
Yeah.
you could sort of, I can only describe it that I could see it on another level. I couldn't physically see it,
Yeah.
but I could see it.
Right.
It's like I could feel it and I could sense it.
Like
somehow.
a sixth sense.
Kind of,
Yeah.
But I could feel a definite physical parameter to it, that it was like here.
And it kept coming
And
closer.
it was getting closer.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, my God, I can't go to sleep. If this thing touches me, I'm dead. Right? And I thought, and it doesn't feel like it's from there, right? Like it's black, right?
It's supposed to be white.
It's supposed to be white. I thought, if I'm going to the light, this should be light, and it's not, it's black. Now, I found out after why it was black.
Oh, and?
Well, I guess, I went to ministers and religious people, and they said, if it was white, you would have accepted it.
Huh.
You would have just given up. And you would have gone. Mm-hmm. You literally were dying, and because I could feel my soul trying to leave my body.
At that moment?
Yes, I could.
Oh.
And it was like I'm trying to pull it back, and I had no strength. I was told later that the reason, whatever terms you want to put it in, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Uh-huh. And if whatever had, once again, given me white, I would have gone to it, and I would have said goodbye to everybody. Right? But I had 2 boys at home. That wasn't what I wanted to do. Because I was given black, and I knew that black is kind of like evil or not very good, I fought it with all the strength I had left, which wasn't much. And I thought, what do I do? I'm at the end of my rope. I felt like I'm just minutes from dying now, just minutes, right? My brain would hardly work. I had no energy. I hadn't eaten for 2 days, 3 days, right? I wasn't hungry. I was dying. And this, whatever this presence was, it was getting closer and closer to me, and it was about to touch me. And I didn't dare go to sleep yet. I was deathly tired. I could hardly keep my eyes open. So I picked up the phone and called my assistant, Ruth, who worked with me in the office in London that we had here. And I didn't want to call my family because I thought they're going to freak out if I say I'm dying and I'm about to die. They're all going to freak out, and I can't handle that. I won't be able to handle it, right? So I didn't want to call anybody in my family. So I called Ruth. I got her voicemail. It was like 8:45 in the morning. And I said, Ruth, I know you've got me on prayer lists all over the place, including your sister out in New Brunswick. I said, could you call her and ask her to just bump up the prayers? Okay, I've since found out that all this stuff about prayers, they've done scientific tests, and there's actually something there. It's energy, okay, positive energy. So people in religion look at it this way, but if you don't want to look at it religiously, you can look at it in other ways. It's really scientific, right? They say that science and religion are going to merge. It won't be long. But anyway, she got my message, and she did call her sister. And her sister called their friends, and they increased the praying for me. And literally 20 minutes later, her and Kathy, her helper in the office, show up in my room. And they said, Rob, we know you're really weak. Don't talk, right? And they came over to me, and they put their arms around me. And I felt this energy. And it was incredible. It was like somebody took battery cables and put them on the car and revved up the engine, and the battery charge is just coming up like this. I couldn't believe what I was feeling. It was like, and I would call it today the power of human love, right? But when you're at that level and almost dead, you totally feel it. And I just felt it going like this. And they just held me for about 3 minutes, and then they said, we're leaving now. And they left. And I look around, and I feel fine. I'm not tired. All of a sudden, I get these huge hunger pains in my stomach.
That's a good sign.
And I look around for my other 3 roommates who's got some food on their table, because it was after breakfast, and the one guy didn't eat his cereal, the other guy didn't eat his toast, and the other guy didn't eat crackers or whatever it was. And I said, guys, I'm super hungry. Could I have your food? And they said, oh yeah, take it. So I took what they had left. And then I placed my order for lunch, and I said, I'm desperately trying to gain weight. Could I have 2 meals? And they said at the bottom, please don't order more than 1 meal, blah, blah, blah. And the guys said, look, we're going to order everything we can extra that you're allowed, and we're going to give it to you, right? So at lunchtime, 2 orderlies came in and made a joke about who's the guy trying to gain weight over here. They gave me 2 full meals with all the options you could order, and I ate everything and drank everything.
Wow.
And I ate all the stuff that the other guys got for me. And I couldn't believe how I felt. And then that night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, the doctor came in. We now have figured out which antibiotic to give you. So it's like I had come right to death's door.
Right.
Something in my body kicked back hard. And I already got to that point before they even gave me medicine. And when I got out of the hospital, my good friend Rick said, I've got an oncologist friend who wants to meet you. He can't believe you survived 3 days with Staph aureus, blood infection. He said most people that present in his office in the morning with that are dead in the afternoon. He wants to meet, he says he wants to touch you, he wants to shake your hand. And it's like, well, do you think I'm some kind of miracle or something? And, I felt almost like a freak or something. And he said, no, he just wants to talk to you. So I met with him after, and he said, yeah, this is unheard of. That, it's pretty much impossible that you lived for so long before they gave you the medicine. So I found out later, too, from Ruth, my assistant, one of the 2 girls that had come and put their arms around me. She says, Rob, there's a reason why we came and put our arms around you when you were almost dead. And she said, can I tell you the story? And I said, yes. She said, remember when I went out to New Brunswick when my granddaughter was dying? My little baby granddaughter was dying. I said, yeah, I remember you took a week off and you went out there. She said, well, we were in the hospital room and the doctors had told us that they expected the baby to be gone within a day or 2. And everybody was really sad. And she said, we were all in the room there, and the rest of the family wanted to go for lunch, so she wanted to just stay back and give her granddaughter a hug. And she did. They all left and went for lunch in the hospital, and Ruth stayed back, and she picked up her baby granddaughter and just held her, and she said, I could feel electricity. I could feel electricity going into her body, right? Energy. And she said, the next day, the doctor said how now the baby was recovering, and literally 3 days later was discharged, and that baby was not supposed to live. She said, that's why I came with Kathy, and we just did the same thing with you. Now, what is it? I don't know. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is it's what happened to me. And I would say that, it's the power of human love. And, once again, I felt it when I was at that much above zero.
Right. And it's because you wanted to.
And I wanted to live.
You wanted to live.
So was it also
really
the will to
badly.
live? Yeah, I did.
Really badly.
I did. And that's why, religious people said that I was given this vision or whatever you want to call it of blackness.
Right.
Because I fought.
Right.
I wouldn't have fought
that's
if
an
it was the
interesting
light.
explanation.
I wouldn't have fought if it was the light. So
Right.
that's why I wasn't given that.
So then after that, then you were given the medication. So you went through this ordeal.
Yeah, I had to be on that for a month, and then
Okay.
I had to.
And then, but you were fighting it for 3 years. Right?
Yes, because that was just the infection.
Yeah.
But I still had cancer.
That's right.
But the interesting thing is my cancer slowed down after this infection. And I never really put two and two together.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And, I had met Dr. Hal Gunn out west, and he ran a clinic called the Center for Integrated Healing, and they would do a lot of supportive things like diet, counseling, things to reduce stress.
Right.
If you have cancer, you should try to reduce your stress, because stress does tend to suppress your immune system. So you want to do things that do the opposite if you're fighting cancer or any other disease, really.
Right.
Pardon me. And I went out west, and I took my formal treatments out there, and I was seeing Dr. Gunn every week at the Center for Integrated Healing as well. And, I was a textbook case. Now, mind you, I had traveled, during those 3 years, I had traveled around the world and taken different treatments, but ultimately I did have to take chemo and radiation. And
You did?
I did, yeah. I did. And, but I went 3 years. I would never advise anybody else to wait these days. I would say, take the traditional treatment, but add other treatments if you want into it as well. I would never recommend to do exactly what I did. That was too much of a chance. Avoiding the traditional treatments for 3 years.
And you did that because you were trying to increase your chances.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I didn't want to take chemo and radiation. And I took many things to build the immune system. But after I finished, I would go back every year and see Dr. Gunn just to say hello. I would go to the BC Cancer Agency and take my CAT scans every year and all the stuff that they did to check. And I went there for, I think, 6 or 7 years. And the very last year, the doctor said, well, you don't have to come back. You're good to go. You've got the same chances of getting cancer now as anybody on the street. So, sayonara. He threw me out of his office with a great big smile, and he says, you don't have to see me again. So I stopped in to see Dr. Gunn at his office, just around the corner in his building. And I thought, well, I might as well say goodbye to Hal, because I won't be out here again. And I asked him what he was doing, and he said, well, I'm working on a cancer vaccine. I said, oh, really? He said, Rob, remember when you got that infection and your cancer slowed down? And I said, did that cause my cancer to slow down? He said, yes, it did. I said, really? He said, I'm working on something very similar to this. And he pulls out a stack of reports out of his drawer and drops them on his desk. He said, these are people that also had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and also had a Staph aureus blood infection like you, and they went right into remission, full remission. Their cancer disappeared. And I said, that's great, but how come my cancer didn't disappear? He said, that's what we're trying to find out. Why some people it does, some people it doesn't. What is the whole mechanism of action here, and what is this mystery that with cancer, if you get certain blood infections or certain infections in your body, your cancer can disappear? So he told me all about this, and I said, well, Hal, do you need an investor? I had sold my company 3 years before and had the money in the bank. And he said, maybe. And he said, take this report home with you or to the hotel tonight and read it, and let's talk tomorrow. So I automatically felt strong that I was going to get involved with it. Like when he showed me all this stuff, because I related to everything. I knew what he was talking about. And the fact that I'd had personal experience with this whole phenomenon myself. I didn't have a remission, But having had this infection slowed my cancer down, like for a year, right? So the next day we talked, and I said, I want to invest, and we will, we'll go ahead and produce these medicines that will, fight against cancer, right? And so we got it started. We started Q Biologics. We started it, and
that's a good segue into Q Biologics.
Yes.
Yes.
And so when I got back, it's funny because when I got back to London, there was a letter in my mailbox, and a friend said, "You don't know Bob, but I know him, and he's got a colon cancer and liver cancer, and he's been given 6 months to live, and he's in a bad way. Would you talk to him on behalf of me just to help him out?" And I always said to myself, when I was literally saying my prayers, when I had that infection, was minutes away from dying, that if, I kind of made a deal. I said, if you allow me to survive, I will always help anybody that asks for help around cancer, right? And not that you can make deals with the guy upstairs, but, it doesn't hurt to ask. So I did. But anyway, I went and saw Bob, and he didn't look very good. He was very gray and ashen looking. He was kind of slumped over. He was very nervous in the way he was talking, and you could just see it in his eyes that he was marked for death. And I said, "Bob, I've just started a company, and we're developing a vaccine against cancer, and maybe you might want to take it. It's not really legal if you took it, but you're dying. I don't even know if we can get it for you." But so we flew him out to BC and got him started on it. And right away, his symptoms started reducing, like his cancers started reducing. Anyway, this fella pulled in, and he's maybe 50 feet away from us. And he's messing around in his car. I had my stuff put up, and Lauren talked me into just putting it away. She said, "At least your thermal camera, put that one's most expensive, put it away in case this guy is coming to steal your stuff."
Were you scared?
I wasn't scared. She was, and I wasn't. We've been so many places around the world. We've been to over 14 countries, all around the world with this stuff. So, it doesn't faze me. And I had my laser in my back pocket. I thought, as long as he doesn't have a gun or a knife, he's going to get a laser in the eyes if he comes after us, right? I would only do that if I had to. Anyway, I said, I'm going to go over and talk to him. Lauren says, "Don't you dare." I said, "Lauren, what are the chances this guy's, out here, coincidence, in the same spot we are? I want to find out what's going on." So she said, "Okay." And I said, "I got my laser in my pocket, no problem, So I go over and say hi to him. And he was a tall guy, handsome. And I was talking to him, but I was really getting the feeling that he was not a human being.
How'd you get that feeling?
Because when you talk to people and ask questions, you can tell. For example, if you're in Australia and you're talking to people in Australia, people know things, and they say them without hesitation. The way he was responding to me was as if he was rehearsed. It didn't seem natural. And many of the things he said, it was almost like he was reading our minds. Because when I asked him, just curious why you pulled into this spot, he says, I want to go sky watching. I mean, that's what we were doing, right? We're in the middle of Australia, hundreds of miles away from anything. And he's coming to this spot, which, you couldn't even see our car from the highway, and he's going to come sky watching. I thought, okay, we'll give him that. And he said that he had just driven 18 hours from the north. He'd just gotten off work, and he'd driven 18 hours, and he was going home to the south for the weekend. And I thought, well, who drives 30 hours home for the weekend? And I thought, okay, maybe that's possible. But he said he worked in a mine in the north, and I looked at his clothes, and they're like all nicely pressed, like brand new looking. And I thought, that's odd. he's come straight from work, and he's in his clothes from work, and they don't look wrinkled, or they look totally pressed or clean. He looks like he just bought them from the store. And I don't see a beard. If he's just driven 18 hours, where's the beard? Right?
I don't grow a beard.
Okay, well, maybe, maybe, but it just seemed one thing after, but everything he said either seemed rehearsed. I wasn't, when you talk to somebody, there's inflections in your voice, my voice. There's body language. There's a lot of things happening.
Right.
Wasn't happening with him. Wasn't happening. It was like he'd been told what to say, right? Or had rehearsed what to say, or even more strange, he seemed to be mirroring us, almost as if he was reading our minds. Because he then came out and said, if you'd feel more comfortable, I can go somewhere else. And Lauren piped up and said, well, that would be very kind of you. And then he left. And I said to Lauren, Lauren, I think that guy was an ET. Just look at all the signs, the stories that we hear about ETs is that they're handsome. Many of them look like us. A lot of them are described as being Nordic looking. A lot of them are tall. So was he? I don't know, but it sure had all the hallmarks and signs.
Right. Right.
But
was that the only time?
Yes.
Okay.
But then here's what happened. So we stayed there through the night with the, all the camera equipment. And then when it started to get light, we packed up and we drove all the way back, 30 minutes back to where our resort was, like along the same highway, all the way back. And we were waiting to turn in. There was a car coming, so we were waiting to turn into the resort. And as the car went by, Lauren said to me, Rob, did you see who that was? I said, no, I'm kind of just waiting to turn. She said, that was our guy from last night. I said, why would he be going back? He told us he was going home to the south. Why was he still there? Like, this is 30 minutes south of where we were observing, not far from Ayers Rock, and he would have continued on to the south. Why was he now going this way, as if back to the spot where we were last night? Right. So I said, let's go chase him, see where he's going, right?
That's exciting.
So I turned the car around, and there was no car in sight. And so I accelerated at a high rate of speed. This is a straight road. It's in the middle of nowhere. I may have been breaking the law, speeding. I will never admit. And, we were back all the way back to that spot in short order and never came across another car. True story. I've got my witness, Lauren. So I don't know. So that is kind of like the wink,
Right.
So I swear, this is 95% chance that we made contact with an ET guy that's here.
Right.
Yeah. And I hear all kinds of stories too. I hear of, where they can show up at a picnic with their suit on.
Okay.
Like out of place. Like they've been educated that all men wear suits, maybe. And that's where you see them in pictures, but not at a picnic, right? So, I compare it to like maybe during World War II, where the Americans have people that have come from Germany and live as Americans in the States who completely speak German, but maybe haven't been there for a number of years. They hire them as a spy. They educate them on everything you have to say, who you are, where you live, all the current events. And then the spy goes back to Germany and meets somebody, but I'll bet you if that person talked to them long enough, they would realize that this person is not from here, And that's what it felt like for me talking with this guy. It didn't feel like he was an Australian. Because the questions that I asked, he was too clumsy with them. He was too awkward with them. There was, like I say, there wasn't any emotion. There wasn't any kind of empathetic connection as you would have with even a stranger that you're asking questions to and that's trying to be helpful to you. I didn't have that. I wouldn't say he was robotic, but it was somewhere between robotic and human. Right. I don't know where.
And you had a gut feeling that this was not human
interaction.
Yeah,
yeah, I did. Yeah. And after I talked to Lauren, see, she was so fearful, but after I talked to her, she said, yeah. And then, of course, that morning, later on, when he was driving the car that went past us, and then we go to follow him and there's no car. Like, what gives? I have no idea.
Right. So now you've been all over the world. You've observed a lot of things. You've seen a lot of things that people have never seen in their lives.
Yes, and many times.
Yes. So now so this is the documentary that you're doing. Where is it going to end, and then what are you going to do after that?
Well, okay, so the name of our, it's Making Contact Project. Be Inspired is the name of the project. And we're doing documentaries. We're also doing a TV series. We've got so much material, too much for even 1 or 2 documentaries. So we're pitching to Netflix and Discovery Channel and History Channel as a series. And we've been teaming up with the experts around the world. We've been teaming up with people who, claim they've made contact. And
how do you find those people?
Networking.
Okay.
Mark McNabb, our producer and partner, he's on Facebook and he talks to people all over the world.
Okay.
And people connect us with other people.
I got you.
We've met, and spent a lot of time with the famous Ricardo Gonzalez out of Peru and Argentina, the famous Sixto Paz Wells, who's made contact, and all his stories are in the newspapers in Peru, including pictures of things in the sky. They've had journalists out to their events where beings have been present. I mean, this really gets fantastic. I don't want to get into too much because it's a journey we've been into and we've been exposed to it more and more, so it doesn't seem like any big deal for me. But telling the stories to people who don't really know about this, it seems almost too fantastic.
Right.
But when I tell you also about the things we've had happen, like the check and the voucher, I mean, we've got full proof that there's something way more than what we experience on a regular day-by-day basis.
Right. So then where are you going to take this after? Like, let's say, for instance, documentary goes on Netflix and goes on air. Okay, what are you going to do after that?
Well, because of me having those experiences as a kid and knowing that these were not our stuff, right? I know, and it's not just, I believe that they're ETs, it's I know. I want to make contact myself.
Okay.
So that's where this is all leading to. And we've often said too, are we going to be able to document it? Probably not. Because we've had so many experiences where our cameras get turned off mysteriously, all the batteries are dead at once. We have a lot of things happen. And we believe that whoever they are fully in control and are fully running this whole dialogue on disclosure and humans finding out about this and being told. We believe that because of what we've experienced in our filming. So I believe they're only letting us have so much, so fast. And I'll probably get to experience a lot of neat things and may come face to face, but I'll probably never get to document it. Like, they probably won't allow it. This is what we understand, is there's been some pictures that have been allowed. Like Ricardo Gonzalez has a picture of a being, but it's very faint, and they allowed him to take that picture. But there's pictures of Zendras. A Zendra is like a half dome of mist.
Okay.
And it's like almost like a wormhole, like you can go in there and come out anywhere else in the universe.
Okay.
Okay. That this is technology that they have. It seems far-fetched. I may have seen one myself, only for about 4 seconds. But we'd like to get closer and closer to the phenomenon, so that's where it's heading. I really would like to make contact with extraterrestrial beings. I've met lots of people who have. We spend time in the field with these people. We've spent time in the field with people who know when they're going to appear, who receive a message. We were just at an event in Chile where the fella, Ricardo, had received a message a year ago. And, you can say, well, he received a message. Can you believe it or not? Well, he gets it backed up by other people who don't even know him and send him the message by text or by email that says, I've received this information, and it's exactly the same as what he got. So once he gets that, and when it's collaborated multiple times, then he will put on an event. And they do show up, like in varying degrees, whether it's just a light that's coming down close in the sky, and that's it, or actual craft with windows, you know. I mean, once again, I've got that picture of the Cusco craft that we saw. What is that? We were in the middle of nowhere. We were on a mountainside, and it was just black sky. And I've got a picture of something, you know. There was no sound.
Right.
There was no noise of any kind. But I got it. You know, the Squamish orb. What was that? That went into the woods.
Right.
No idea.
Right.
So, you know, do I have any answers? All I know is that we're trying to get closer and closer to the phenomenon with the ultimate goal of making contact. And actually, you know, what kind of message do they have for us? We're attached to this medium of film and documentaries and TV shows and stuff. What is it you'd like us? Use us as a vehicle, you know. I mean, the earth is getting into be pretty rough shape. And, you know, human beings are not kind to each other. We kill each other. And from everything I hear is this race of ours, which is a very warring race, if we're going to evolve and we're going to be out there traveling the space in the universe, we got to get past this warring aspect. And that's what we keep hearing, is that these races are not even going to let us go out there until we can evolve past that. There's been many examples given quietly to let people know, especially authorities know, that they're there. For example, missile silos out in the West, in the United States, they've started the engagement sequence. Like, the US didn't start it, but craft were spotted in the base by the servicemen, and mysteriously the silos opened, and the missiles were getting ready to launch. These are ones that are pointed at the, you know, USSR and so on. And at the same token, the shutdown sequence was started. And this was completely out of the hands of the military people. This is all documented in briefs from these military people. Okay,
Wow.
This is many years ago, so it's information that can be released now.
Right.
Okay, but I've seen these accounts.
When was this? When this happened?
That was probably back in the 60s or 70s.
Okay, still back then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, they can release the information now. But
Yeah,
there's tons of incidents like this. There's a well-known incident where there was a news helicopter that got into trouble, and it was going to crash. I think it's in South America. And there was a craft, and literally there was a beam that locked onto it, just like out of the movies, straightened it up, brought it up, and then it disappeared, and the helicopter was able to continue on. It was about to crash. So there's been lots of examples of things showing that, one, these operate in a benevolent way, okay. If they wanted to do harm to us, they could have done it hundreds of years ago. Like they could do it at any time. Okay.
Especially if they have all this technology.
Yeah. But they seem to be advanced. They seem to be wanting to help us, but they can't do it for us. It's like your children. You kind of teach them, but you can't do everything for them.
Right.
And unfortunately, you got to let them stumble and scrape their knees a little bit.
Right.
Now, and they can touch the front of the stove warm, but if they go to touch a red hot element, nobody will be over to that stove faster than you to grab the handle.
Right.
So they say, I don't know for sure, but they say that if we actually get to the point where we're going to destroy ourselves, that they would intervene. But they cannot. I guess there's rules and protocols that they can only get involved with us to a certain degree, and that's it.
Right.
And we have seen a lot of sort of other kind of communication with us. Did you ever see the movie Interstellar?
No.
Okay, where the father is trying to get the attention of his daughter in the den. Yeah, and I mean, he's tiny, so she can't see him. So with all his strength, he manages to push a book out of the bookshelf onto the floor. And that's how he starts a communication somehow. We have had so many things happen that are unconventional. And we see it as a form of communication. They're little signs, little signals. Maybe people call it paranormal, but we don't. We see it as little signals, little signs that, maybe they exist on another dimension. And this is the only way that they can communicate with us without a lot of expenditure of effort. Like to actually meet with us in our dimension and our level appears to be something that's not common and doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
But they appear to be able to do it in ways that, like with that check incident we had, or the voucher incident, like that's impossible to happen, yet it happened, right?
Right.
There seems to be other things that they can do. For example, we were in Australia, in this case we were in the United Kingdom. We were with a guy who claims that he had met an MIB, Man in Black. Whether it's government or ET, I don't know. But he was telling his stories, we documented it, and after the day was over, we said, we'd like to take you out for dinner. As a little thank you for, people don't get paid to be in our documentary. It's, if you want to be interviewed, we'll interview you. But he had spent many hours with us, and as a thank you, we were going to take him out for dinner to the nearest pub or whatever. And got in the car, and, CE5 is a term used when people go out and try to make contact. What was on the license plate in the car in front of us was CE5, but the next license plate on the next car was MIB, like Men in Black. And that's what we were talking about. We were talking about CE5 stuff all day. We were talking about his experiences with MIBs. And, the next two license plates we see were CE5 and MIB.
And they were right in front of you?
Yeah, as soon as he got in the car.
Another coincidence.
What's that all about?
That's right.
What's that all about?
That's right.
A coincidence.
Yes, another coincidence.
It goes on and on and on and on and on to the point where you just roll your eyes. It's like not another one of these things. Like it happens all the time.
That's crazy.
We were interviewing the famous Damien Knott in Australia, and he seems to get stuff wherever he goes. They just show up in the skies and he documents. He's the world famous guy who's famous in Australia, right? And we were interviewing him. We were at we were going out for the evening to observe in the sky, and he's with us with his girlfriend and stuff. And Mark put the question out to him, when ET show or whatever, what kinds of things can happen? And he was about to say, they can shut down your cameras, they delete your memory cards, your batteries go dead. And just as he went to speak, the audio channel in Mark's camera quit. Now, have you ever had an audio channel quit in your camera? I've never had one. But just as he went to say the kinds of things that can happen, boom, it happened. A coincidence? I don't know.
That's interesting.
And it just goes on and on and on.
Well, I really do hope that you meet those extraterrestrials. Seriously, I really do.
I'd like to get some answers.
Yeah. And then maybe they'll even give you more answers or more insight as to what we're missing out on.
Well, since we're in a position, we've got, the different channels really want our material. We've shown it to them and they would like to put it on their networks. So since we're in a position to be able to get something out, let's try to get out, if they have a message for us, let's try to get out something. What is it?
It'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. Well, your journey has been something. From the time that you were a little kid until now. It hasn't been any short of any excitement whatsoever. And you've had a lot of pump, a lot of motivation that swayed through different channels. And you've carried it through and you still have a smile on your face.
I don't know what to say. We're just having fun.
You're just having fun and you're following your passion. You're doing exactly what you should do. Now, here's a question for you. What is one message that you want to give out to those listening to us and those watching? Those people that are struggling with their passion, finding their passion. What is it that you want to tell them in terms of advice?
Well, a couple things. For me, I was very interested in different things as a kid. And as an older person, I followed up on that. For example, being interested in telephones and communication. And then I went on to start a company that was like a $76 million company that was a long-distance reseller in telephone communication, long-distance communication. It all started with my interest as a kid. Okay, the UFO stuff now. We're about to sell our series and about to sell a documentary to one of the networks. Okay, once again, that started as a kid. What I would tell people is, for those that are in their 20s or 30s and don't know what to do, or even older, what interest did you have as a kid? What was your passion as a kid? What really made you interested as a kid? And follow up on that. You know, where could that have a place now in today's world? It's something that you were super interested in. You know, maybe you should follow up on that. That's what I did.
And even if you think it's super silly and you think it's not relevant, just follow up on it.
Yeah, maybe do some research. Just, you know, if it's a passion that you had and you've lost it, why don't you reignite it and just see? You know, if you follow a passion that you had as a kid, it will maybe open the door into something that has relevance in today's society, in today's business, in today's things. You know, like the UFO thing. I mean, I was fascinated by what I saw. I knew it was not from this earth. And it's always remained with me, like, what was that? What was it? I want to know.
Right.
I want to know.
Right.
I don't want to suppress it. I want to know.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I'm still looking.
And the phone thing as well.
Yeah, and the phone thing,
Yeah.
I was so interested in, and I read up all on Alexander Graham Bell and Edison and all these inventors and stuff. And, you know, when I needed to start work, and all the doors seemed open. So, you know, lose the negativity.
That's what it is.
Okay, and keep an open mind. Remember, a mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And follow your passion. And you know, the people that are thrown in your path who try to discourage you, it's only meant to make you fight. And to crystallize your resolve. You know, do I really want to do this or not? It's like, damn it all, yes I do. And I don't care what he says or she says. You know, that's why the naysayers are put there, or the haters on YouTube are put there. It's really to, you know, hold a fire up and you know, melt away all the chaff, and it will force you to get right to what it is you really want to do. You know?
It's meant to strengthen your resolve.
It really is, and it will.
As opposed to put you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it throws you off your rocker, then maybe you're not meant to be on that one. Look for another one.
That's right.
Because when you find the one that you should be doing and you're supposed to be doing, it's got your name on it. It doesn't matter what
You become
people
unshakable.
say. You will be. Totally.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. It's been a pleasure, honestly. I could sit here and just listen to your stories all day. I could. And your stories are phenomenal and very fascinating. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you guys for tuning in. It was honestly, this was a journey that I experienced as he was telling the story. So I kind of got lost in it as he was telling it because it was so fascinating. It was phenomenal. I hope you guys gained a lot of value from it. I hope you guys learned a lot. I certainly did. One of the biggest lessons that we learned from this is to find your passion and to keep going, to get rid of all the negativity and to not let anyone stop you. Because that's how you get to where you're supposed to be. Thank you again for tuning in to Discover with Sbenati. And I'm your host, Dr. Halim Sbenati. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Pleasure. Wow.
How much time has gone by?
A lot.
Oh my God.